Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming in, and we'll just give a minute to make sure everybody can get in okay. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We have a lot of people that are joining us tonight. We had quite a few people register, so that shows there's a lot of great interest in our topic tonight. So thank you, everybody, for being here. All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. I apologize, we were a little bit late, so we want to get started right away. We have a really great night planned for everybody tonight. Let's start off with, I will introduce myself. My name is Jenny Jenkins. I'm so happy to be here tonight. This is a topic that is really important to me and something that I care a lot about. So I work for Hoosier Environmental Council. I'm the Senior Special Projects Manager for HEC, and I'm just really thrilled that everybody's here. Some of you may be familiar with HEC already. We have been around for about 40 years, so many people know who we are, but Hoosier Environmental Council has been working to improve quality of life for all Hoosiers throughout the entire state. We've been working on it through strong environmental policy and environmental practices. We focus on everything from clean air, clean water, protecting our natural spaces, environmental justice, sustainable development, sustainable agriculture, and so much more. We really cover the whole gamut of environmental issues in our state, and we work hard every day to try and make Indiana a better place to live, work, and play. So we are 501c3. We're really a relatively small staff and rely on donations. So we encourage you to keep us in mind now or in the future if you're giving to your favorite nonprofit. So this is a relatively new thing for us to work on the native plants side, and we've actually done a series of webinars. The first one being last month, and then we have tonight, and then we have another one next month. I'm really excited to talk about native plants because it is one of my favorite topics. We're also very honored to be partnering with the Indiana Native Plant Society. And again, if you're familiar with native plants at all, you've definitely heard about the Native Plant Society. It is really the authority in our state for all things native plants. So we actually have the president of the Indiana Native Plant Society speaking tonight as well. She'll be speaking first. I'm sure she'll say a little bit more about the Native Plant Society, but I do encourage you to check them out as soon as the webinar is over. Go to their website and take a look. There is a wealth of information there. They're really, like I said, the authority for native plants in our state, and pretty much any question you have, you're going to get answered by them. We also have Laura Essex speaking afterwards. She has got a great business that she has started doing design of native plants. It's called Favor Native. She'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, too. Back to the Native Plant Society, just they do offer memberships, and they range anywhere from $10 onto all the way up. $10, I think, is for students, but you can get an individual membership for $35. It's really a great deal, and highly encourage, if you're interested in native plants or if you're already involved in native plants, becoming a member is really a fantastic way to spend that little bit of money. So we will be sharing a link after the presentations are over that will be about this webinar. We encourage you to please take just a few minutes to fill those out. It's a short survey. It really does help HEC to improve our presentations as we go along. And many of you joined us for our last webinar where we discussed the benefits of native plants over turf grass. Liz Masur spoke on that. If you were there, we learned about why turf grass is kind of considered a dead zone and it doesn't do a whole lot for the environment, whereas native plants really provide a wealth of services for the same pollinators and all kinds of insects that do services for us and the rest of the environment. So tonight we'll really be getting more into the nuts and bolts of how to make that happen, how to get started, and how to actually get going with your native plants and converting your lawn into native plants and where to get them, all of those kind of things. So just so you know, next month it will be May 29th, and we will share a link momentarily with about this, but the next webinar will be the third in the series, and we'll be talking about how you can advocate for change whether it's within your homeowners association, your HOA, or in a city and town level where you can really push for ordinances that are a little more friendly to native plants and less friendly to turf grass, so that you are allowed to plant what you want in your yard and not be fined for it. We have a lot of movement going on in our state that is making that happen, and it's really exciting to see. And so we'll be talking to you with some experts about people who have done this already and making changes in their yard, in their homes, in their yards, as well as their neighborhoods and their communities. So I will stop for that. I stop right now on that. I want to introduce Coralie Palmer, who is our first speaker. Coralie is originally from London, and she's lived in India and Australia, and for over a decade has been thankful to call Indiana home. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in biological sciences from Oxford University with a focus on botany, zoology, and ecology, and a background in conservation and environmental education and landscape design. Since moving to Indiana, studying the native plants and ecology of the Midwest has become a big passion of hers. Coralie is the founder of Sugarbush Ecological Landscapes and currently serves as president for the Indiana Native Plant Society. She has just joined the team at the Global Center for Species Survival based at the Indianapolis Zoo as the Marine Conservation Coordinator. So Coralie loves spending time traveling with her husband and 3 boys, visiting national parks in the US, and is constantly inspired by the beautiful gardens close to her family home by the sea in Cornwall, England. We're really excited to have Coralie here. She has a wealth of knowledge on native plants, and I will turn it over to hear her from here. Thanks so much, Coralie.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I really appreciate that. It's great to be here. And so I know I'll just give you a brief overview of what I'm going to be covering. So firstly, I know this was covered a bit in the last webinar, so I'll just do a very brief overview on why native plants are so critical and the importance of restoring ecological function to human-dominated landscapes. I'll give a brief overview of some of the key things to consider when choosing native plant species for a landscape to really maximize ecological value of your plantings. I'll cover some basic maintenance and important sustainable gardening practices. And then I'll take a quick dive into the resources that are available to help you. So first up, why are native plants so important? And it really boils down to this key concept of biodiversity. So biodiversity is the variety of life in a given place. Native plant communities support a great deal more biodiversity than introduced plants. And it's mainly due to the specialized relationships that have evolved between plants and insects, with host specificity driven by phylogenetic history, plant defenses, and ecological experience within specific environments. So the great majority of insect herbivores are diet or host plant specialists, meaning that they can really only eat or live on plants that they have developed a relationship with through evolutionary time. So host range expansions are really the exception, which means so more species cannot use non-natives for growth and reproduction than can. And the largest guild of insect herbivores is both the most vulnerable to non-native plants and the most valuable to insectivores. I'm so sorry about the background noise. My dog's playing. I'm so sorry. So additionally, while some insects attempt to reproduce on non-native plants, these attempts can become ecological traps when the use of non-native hosts can result in reduced fitness or increased mortality. So they found that some female insects, while they may visit non-native plants and lay eggs on them, that doesn't always support larval development. So while introduced plants can provide some ecosystem function, there is almost always a loss in biodiversity when they're used in place of native plants. And so research from a very broad geographic range and across different species indicates a very clear trend. So biodiversity is in very steep decline. A global assessment published in 2019 found that biodiversity is declining faster than any time in human history. It's estimated around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, and the current rate of global species extinctions is tens to hundreds of times higher than the average over the last 10 million years. And very worryingly, that rate is actually accelerating. Here in the US, the 2019 assessment found staggering losses in the North American bird population, with an estimated net loss of 2.9 billion breeding adults since 1970. And devastating losses were found among birds in every biome. So biodiversity is in decline, but what does that mean? And does it really matter? And the short answer is yes, it matters an awful lot. So the loss of biodiversity affects us all. A reduction in genetic diversity affects species' potential for adaptation, ongoing evolution, and survival. And this is becoming even more critical as fragile populations face increased pressures from climate change and loss of habitat through rapid development. So loss of individuals is in itself a tragedy, and the loss of abundance of individuals can lead to species extinctions. And then the loss of each unique and intrinsically valuable species is irreparable. And then each species lost increases the risk of cascading effects and the loss of interdependent species and the breakdown and loss of entire ecosystems. And that is really, really important. So ecosystems are incredibly complex, and we have limited understanding of even the most well-studied species interactions. We just don't know where the breaking points for ecosystems are. And when we lose biodiversity, we destabilize these systems and we risk their collapse. And without functioning ecosystems, we lose the vital ecosystem services which support life. So some ecosystem services enhance our quality of life, but others are absolutely vital for human existence, such as the provision of oxygen, food, and fresh water. So we are completely dependent on the ecosystem services provided by the plants and animals, and biodiversity is critical for ensuring the stability of the ecosystems that provide these services. And so the conservation of biodiversity is really pretty critical. And that is where native plants come in. So by supporting biodiversity, they play a critical role in supporting the ecosystems that we really rely on. So now, hopefully, you're going to be using native plants in your landscaping. And so there are a few things you can do, you can consider to really maximize the ecological value of your plantings, as well as increasing the beauty and the value of the space for you. So these, and I'll go into each of these in a little more detail, but these are kind of the things to consider are, so assess your site conditions and try and echo natural native plant communities if that's possible. So try considering not just forbs, not just herbaceous perennials, but also trees and shrubs, vines and graminoid species. Try and include keystone genera, and then plant for specialists and increase diversity. And then also, and we'll look at this last, consider flowering phenology, which is kind of the time of year, the time of when the individual plants have flowers or fruits or resources that they give. So the first one, assess your site conditions. So this is really looking at your site and looking at the aspect, so which way it faces, whether it's getting sun in the morning or in the evening, whether it's east, south or east facing, or and then look at the soil composition. So we probably, if you're in Indiana, you're probably on an Indiana heavy clay, but if you're from somewhere else, there are fantastic site maps that are available, soil maps that are available online. So you can either do a soil test, you can buy a small kit and do a soil test, or you can just look online and put in your zip code, and you can find that soil composition. Look at soil moisture. That has a really important, a really big impact on what plants will thrive in your area. And then echoing the native plant communities that thrive in those conditions that your site is resembling. So this, perhaps it's a woodland or a woodland's edge or a water's edge or a prairie. And at the Indiana Native Plant Society website, we have some native plant palettes that will give really good examples of plants that grow well together in these types of conditions. So adding a mix of trees, shrubs, herbaceous flowering plants, vines, grasses, sedges, and rushes can really increase the number and diversity of species supported by your plantings, providing It can provide an increased area and variety of habitat, especially for trees with increased vertical height. And then those layers of planting are really important, especially for overwintering habitat. Also, wonderfully, trees and shrubs can be a lot lower maintenance than herbaceous perennials. So those can be something to consider if you're looking for a more low maintenance garden. And then including keystone genera. So recent research really highlights that not all native plants are equivalent in terms of their contributions of energy flow through food webs and their support of interaction diversity. So some genera are critical for local ecosystems, really going above and beyond in terms of their ecological productivity. So for example, a 2020 study, which included over 12,000 butterfly and moth species and more than 2,000 native plant genera, found that on average, across counties sampled, 14% of plant genera supported more than 90% of Lepidopteran diversity, that's butterflies and moth diversity. So these keystone genera support orders of magnitude of more butterfly and moth species than the majority of other local plant genera. Additionally, data from a 2021 study suggested that bird foraging is non-random, reflecting preferences for keystone tree species which host large numbers of caterpillar species and so are more rewarding. So this research highlights that planting, restoring, and protecting keystone species in both natural and human-dominated landscapes is really important for both bird and insect populations. And Dr. Doug Tallamy and his team at the University of Delaware have done some fantastic research to identify these keystone plants. And so I have some of them here, but also if you go into the National Wildlife Federation Plant Finder, you can again put in your zip code and it will come back with the keystone flora that are local to your area. So these are some of the medium to large trees, and oaks really are the number one. We have a lot of native oak species here in Indiana, but in the eastern US as a whole, and they really are the kind of superstar when it comes to supporting invertebrate species. These small trees and shrubs, if you don't quite have enough room for an oak or some of those larger species, these can be fantastic alternatives or additions, and especially for that understory or layered planting underneath one of the larger shade trees. So native vines are a lovely one to consider, especially if you have a fenced yard and not a huge amount of area. You can use that vertical height to go up and really increase your planting area. And then herbaceous plants, yes, the goldenrod and aster are the kind of, again, the superstars in this arena. And then, so those keystone plants support very high numbers of Lepidoptera. That's what the studies really looked at. So those are butterflies and moths. And so species richness throughout the trophic levels, because the caterpillars of those really do support so much of the other wildlife that feeds on those. But the intention isn't to limit or restrict your planting to just those. Ideally, you want to increase plant diversity overall with the intentional inclusion of those keystone plants. And then it's also really important to consider other insects and what they specialize on, and particularly native bees. So native bees will often specialize on a particular plant family or genus when gathering pollen. Less commonly, they appear to specialize on a single species, but really it's that family or genus level that you want to increase the diversity at. And planting for specialists is really important because it then provides habitat for both specialist and generalist insects and invertebrates. So increasing diversity at the family level increases the potential support for as many specialists as possible and can have a really significant positive impact on insect populations. And the Xerces Society provides some excellent information on endangered pollinators, on planting pollinators. And Heather Home has fantastic free downloadable plant lists and resources, particularly for native bees and wasps, at pollinatorsnativeplants.com. And then phenology. So another big consideration is ensuring that you're planting so that landscapes have a successional blooming period, and that they provide floral resources for as long a season as possible, from early spring right through to late fall. So including plants that have a long bloom time, provide floral resources, particularly early or late in the season, and those that provide nesting and sheltering sites is really key. And when planting is limited, plants that combine some of these elements can make the most impact. So in the spring in particular, this can be some of the woody species. We're really lucky here in Indiana to have some of the few remaining populations of rusty patch bumblebees. So considering floral resources that will support these populations, particularly early in the spring, is really important. Later spring and summer tend to bring kind of more of a bounty of blooms. And then through into late autumn, late blooming species such as goldenrods and asters can be a lifeline for those creatures preparing for migration or overwintering. And then once you've chosen your native species, adopting a few key principles and ecological maintenance practices can really make a big difference to how valuable those native plants are. So increasing the abundance of the plants, choosing straight native species, sourcing mindfully and avoiding chemical use, leaving the leaves and considering overwintering habitat, and reducing mowing are all kind of pretty key things that you can do to make a big difference. So increasing the abundance of plants. Planting ideally should really include more than 70% native plants by biomass to support wildlife populations. So research indicates that this is a threshold level below which the probability of sustaining some local bird populations plummets to pretty much zero. And then a 2020 review found evidence that non-native plants, both invasive species and widely used ornamental plants, can actually be considered a threat to insect populations when you're looking at this metric. And then choosing straight native species. So this means choosing not a cultivar, just a straight native. So if, for example, you see on a plant label Echinacea purpurea, that would be a straight native coneflower. If you were to see Echinacea purpurea white swan or something, that indicates that it is a cultivar. It is not a straight native species. And from an ecological standpoint, a straight native species is a much safer option. Nativars or cultivars can alter pollination and foraging behavior, and they can potentially impact native plant populations through genetic interactions. And then sourcing mindfully. So really what we're looking at here is sourcing plants and seeds that haven't been treated with systemic chemicals, and particularly there's a real concern over neonicotinoid chemicals. So neonics can lead to changes in foraging behavior. They can lead to reduced predator avoidance, delay development, and reduce reproduction in bees, even at very, very low residue levels. They're systemic insecticides, which means they spread to every part of the plant. And because they're absorbed, they can be present in the pollen and nectar, making these toxic to pollinators that feed on them. A number of them are potentially very long lasting, which means they can cause harm to pollinators even when the initial application is made months before the bloom period. So please actively source plants and seeds that have not been treated with neonics. And if possible, please use your buying power to influence the supply chain. So ask your suppliers about neonics and the provenance of their plants, and help to influence their buying decisions. And then avoiding chemical use or avoiding prophylactic chemical use. So herbivory by native insects will typically not kill a healthy plant. Evidence of herbivory indicates the plant is in fact kind of contributing to the ecosystem and should really be welcomed. It doesn't indicate the need for insecticide use. So in a stable ecosystem with sufficient biodiversity, insect levels are kept largely in check by natural predators and parasitoids, including many of the birds that are such a welcome sight in our gardens. And really, please don't use pyrethroid pesticides for mosquito control. And most of our native plants really don't need extra fertilizers, or at least don't need chemical fertilizers at all. And then using native plantings around pond and water edges can really help to reduce any runoff from fertilizer that other people are using into the waterways. And I know that was covered in a lot of detail in the last webinar. So leaving the leaves and considering overwintering. So most caterpillars and many other insects find pupation and overwintering sites in leaf litter or under the soil. So planting that layered canopy and leaving ground cover beneath trees can be very, very valuable. So leaving fallen leaves and leaving stems and plants intact over winter provides food, overwintering habitat, and nest sites. Heather Home advises cutting back spent stems at varying heights, so kind of 6, 12, and 24 inches in the spring to create habitat for bees as they emerge from the ground, leaving some stems fully intact right through until the end of April or early May. And then stems that are left for nests should remain intact throughout the year and not removed before the following spring, and ideally should just be left indefinitely until they kind of naturally decay or fall. And then reduce mowing. So if possible, please do try to delay initial spring mowing as long as possible to avoid killing caterpillars and other overwintering creatures that are emerging. So in the UK, no mow May is a very big thing. Or at least if you can't wait that long, at least adopting less frequent mowing regimes and no mow zones. And then when mowing is required, setting mower heights as high as possible, ideally above 4 inches. And then to reduce wildlife mortality, trying to avoid mowing in the evenings and using a mowing pattern that starts in the middle and moves out to set power, and also to set power tools going for a few minutes prior to use. It just allows any wildlife that is there a little bit of a chance to flee. So those are some of the key kind of concepts, and now they're resources, and there is really a lot out there, a lot available. So I am going to be biased here, and the Indiana Native Plant Society website is really fantastic. It's managed by our webmaster Wendy Ford, and it does have an enormous amount of information. We do have there is a landscaping section with all of these categories on there, and it really is a fantastic resource. And then if you should hopefully can find what you need there, and if not, we do have a very active Facebook group as well, and our administrators on that are very knowledgeable. So if you have a question still and you need to reach out, they will always be answered on Facebook or over email. We also have a really fantastic native plant finder tool, and this we're very excited. We just launched this last year, and this is wonderful because you can filter by light conditions, by moisture, by the bloom color, by the season that you want to highlight, by pollinators. There's also a bar to adjust for plant height, and it is well populated. It's a fantastic plant finder. We are adding to it all the time, so it is getting better and better. But please go in and take a look at that. And yes, and we'll be continuing to add to it as we get more information. We also, in terms of where to buy the plants, so we have a buy natives directory. So if you are a plant grower or a designer, you can register, and then we have a directory. So as a user of the site, you can go in and search, and we We have seasonal native plant sales listed on there. We have native plant nurseries. We have landscapers and designers who specialize in using native plants. It is a really fantastic resource. So I'd encourage you to go in and take a look at that. And then lastly, we have a garden certification program. So we think the Indiana native plant one is fantastic, and it's a way to really kind of help educate people about what you're doing with your garden or with your planting. There are also other fantastic ones. Indiana Wildlife Federation has a great one. The Homegrown National Park have a sign. Xerxes Society have a program. I think Wild Ones also have a program, and it's been shown that registering your native plantings really does have the potential to contribute to city scale heterogeneity and kind of mitigate the homogenization of residential landscapes. There have been some wonderful studies on that and showing how it really does make a difference. So once you put all that work into choosing your native plants and putting them in, if you're happy to advertise it, that is fantastic. So that's me. That's my contact details. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Coralie. Appreciate that. A lot of great information. I know we have a lot of people asking about slides and getting information. And yes, we will provide links to the slides within the next few days over email. So if you registered to attend, we will send those to you as well. And thank you so much. It's so much great information, and Coralie clearly knows her stuff, and it's fantastic to hear all of that. So we will move on quickly since we want to get to everybody. We have Laura Essex from Favor Native speaking next. And Laura is the owner and lead designer of Favor Native, which is an Indianapolis-based garden design company. Favor Native was founded in 2018 and provides garden coaching and garden designs featuring native and native-friendly plants. Laura lives on the west side of Indianapolis with her husband and son, and her favorite native plant is the purple coneflower. So Laura also has a wealth of knowledge about these things and does some beautiful designs. Check out her website. I'm sure she'll mention it. So I will go ahead and hand it over to her. And then just as a reminder, and I apologize, I didn't mention this earlier, any Q&As, please feel free to put in the question and answer box, which you are doing. And then when Laura is wrapped up, we will do some live question and answering as well. So thank you so much. I'll hand it on over.
Hello, everybody. I don't know about you all, but I feel so soothed after listening to Coralie for the past 20 or 25 minutes. I wish she could just like read to me at night. So welcome to the webinar and to my portion of it. So what I will be doing for you guys tonight is talking about how to actually get started on converting a chunk of your lawn into a garden space for you to plant all these wonderful native and good for the environment plants. So the photo you see here is actually is my home garden. It was my first like 95% native garden that I put in just to convince myself that I could do it, and it worked out really well. And I said that purple coneflowers are my favorite plant, and that's them front and center in that photo. So yeah, it is possible. As I like to say, just getting started is the hardest part. So with all the wealth of information that we have on native plants and just everybody getting into this, just wanting to do the right thing, it starts to be overwhelming. It happens to everyone. So just putting in a new garden can be really intimidating. I went through this myself. I still kind of go through it with every new space that I want to put in my own yard. For some reason, I get slightly paralyzed at the thought of that. So starting a new garden. So I did go down this path because tillers frankly scare me. They're kind of loud and sharp looking. I have very hard clay soil in my yard, so the tiller would be a nightmare trying to get that done. And I would imagine that a lot of us on this webinar are kind of in the same situation. So this no-till method that I have kind of worked out through, my son likes to count them through my 8 gardens in my yard. It's pretty straightforward. It's affordable, and it is guaranteed effective to smother out your lawn and to get you a blank canvas for your new plants. Plus, you get to keep your lower extremities. Your lower back is going to be grumpy, but nothing scary going on here. So a brief overview of this method. You have just the layout stage. You're choosing the placement, you're choosing the shape, where you want it to go, the orientation of it, where it should be skinny, where it should be wide. The next step, you're going to cut the grass super low, and you're going to define the edges of the garden, the rounded shape or how far it needs to go out. Straight edges, super easy, but curves need a little more care, and I've got a good kind of plan and approach for that. The step after that is spreading paper or cardboard over the cut grass. And keeping the paper intact at this point is the key to a clean removal of the grass and no breakthrough of grass in the establishment of the garden. And then finally, you just mulch it down with 2 or 3 inches of mulch, water it down, and then wait. And I will get into more details of all these steps as we go along. And I did squeeze in at the very end a few notes on design approaches as well. So we'll get to that for you guys. Okay, so the layout stage. This is the intimidating part. This is the one you're really having to use your noggin and figure out what's going on. So you may already have an idea of where you want this garden to go, but you might not, and you're kind of open to finding things out. So I love to coach people to prioritize the view out your windows, like where, I spend the most time looking out the window at my kitchen sink. So 2 of my gardens are visible from my kitchen sink. So the weather and the temperature and humidity, or lack of temperature, is fairly uncomfortable in Indiana for the majority of the year. So you're going to be in your house, and it would be nice to be able to look out and see the butterflies, no matter where you are in your house. The second thought, aim for trouble spots where your grass is kind of puny anyway, or something ugly is there. Like maybe in my case, I live on a corner lot and there's a giant circular, like, manhole, whatever you want to call it, right at the corner of my yard. And so I have integrated that into a garden to make it not stick out so much in a sea of grass. Think about where you walk. So not only where you want to keep grass or keep a path, like maybe you don't want to put kind of a climbing prairie rose near where you're going to be passing by and scratching your arm. So just kind of minor things like that. The next time you pull into your driveway at home or you park out in front of your house, where is your eye drawn? For me, it's usually drawn to either the pretty flowers that are blooming or the ugly things that need taken care of. My neighbors, they have maybe a few things that I wish were a little different, and I tend to kind of look at that. So what I've been personally considering is putting some nice shrubs in that area so that my eye is not drawn to the area that I don't want to see when I get home. And then the last thing to think about is, who's your audience? Is it just yourself? Is perfectly acceptable answer. Do you have a lot of kids in your neighborhood and you want to have flowers for them to look at and bees to watch? Yeah, just who is going to be enjoying this garden as well as you? So this is actually a photo of my own house about 3 or 4 years ago. I have a giant garden in this spot now. So, a few things that stick out to me is the monster green arborvitaes that are there. They had outgrown their space long ago, and it was time for them to get changed out. Um, the the naked windows, that was always where my eye was kind of drawn, and I'm like, what else is going on there? Why do we not have something going on there? And then there's a vent on the side of the wall. How about I just put some pretty stuff in front of that so people are looking at that instead of the awkward side of my house, because I happen to have a road right on that side. So that's kind of where my thought process goes when I'm putting in a new garden. And I do see, so Paula, you had asked how long you typically wait. We're going to cover that, so we'll get to you. Okay, so still in the layout stage. So we're kind of, you've picked the spot, and now you want to build the shape. I like to use a garden hose because it's very flexible. It's good for putting in curves, and it's, super easy to move, and it really helps you envision where the garden is going to go. And here I have a long measuring tape, so that's what I'm using in this photo. One thing to keep in mind is to avoid, as you're setting this shape, to avoid leaving kind of like awkward grass patches that you're going to have to hop your mower over to get to, or you're going to have to weed whack them. Just kind of envisioning how you will still need to maintain and mow around this really helps you set gentle, not extreme sharp curves and strange shapes, just very smooth and fluid shapes tend to work the best. Okay, so you've got your layout, you've got your idea. It's time to commit, or to mostly commit. So get your hose out of the way so you don't get that caught up in your mower. That would be no fun for anyone. And I actually like to sprinkle flour on the grass where the line needs to go, because it sticks and then it will wash away when you're done. Makes it super easy, a very environmentally friendly way of marking your edge lines. You want to set your mower to the lowest setting, but still avoid scratching into the soil and disturbing it. So you're still going to have a little bit of grass, somewhere sticking up there, but it's not going to be the height that it usually is. So as low as possible. So you just cover the whole inside of your perimeter with that short cut through of grass. And my tip, or I guess tips for really hitting and setting those curved lines. You can kind of see it in this photo here. I actually cut strips and shapes out of black landscape fabric. So not covering the whole area, because landscape fabric is not our friend in the long term, because it actually makes a barrier over the old soil. And as you mulch and leaves fall and plant stems and all kinds of good stuff is happening on the top, it actually creates a dead level right below that landscape fabric. And that's not what we want. We want healthy soil. We want everything to be interacting that wants to be interacting. So the purpose here is that after your grass has been smothered out, that black landscape fabric is super easy just to pull out. So you just wiggle it, pull it out, the mulch stays in place, and you have your rounded edge along the side there. I usually, so yeah, about 6 to 12 inches wide is usually good enough to get a curved shape, but to keep it in place. And then weigh it down or just use the little garden tacks to attach that into place. Okay, so you've got your edges covered. You've got your grass cut low. Here's where it really starts to take shape. So you'll need any of the following. So cardboard is usually in pretty ready supply. The important thing when you're using cardboard is that you have all of the tape and the labels removed. So anything that is kind of glossy or plasticky, or that you can imagine would not break down with being damp over the next few years. That needs to be pulled off of the cardboard so it's clean and dry. Another option is newspaper. So, you know, 7 to 8 years ago, it felt like newspaper was more readily available than it is now. So newspaper definitely still a viable option, but it's a little harder to get these days. And if you are using newspaper, one thickness of newspaper is not enough. You'll need to plan to use at least 2 to 3 thicknesses of newspaper. And then my new favorite way of doing it is actually just purchasing like the brown rolls of craft paper. They have like landscaping paper at the local hardware stores or craft stores have rolls of brown paper. You get to cover a lot of area in one swoop. It stays in place pretty well as you're working. So that's my new favorite option. And then once you've made your paper choice, you just need to plan for enough mulch to cover your area in a 2 to 3 inch thick layer. So the internet is full of mulch calculators. So you just enter your dimensions and that you want 2 inches thick or 3 inches thick. And the yeah, they'll help you get on the right track. They'll tell you either in cubic feet or in how many bags you need to buy. So very handy all over the internet. Okay, and then I had the note down below, just avoiding any sort of paper or materials that are glossy or plasticky, that are just not going to break down very well. So the next step in laying the paper down. So this is kind of the most crucial step, because this is where you need to be thorough and to really get a solid cover underneath that mulch to help the grass really get choked out. And this is also when your lower back really starts to feel it. So you're going to spread the paper or the cardboard over the mowed area, and a good trick to do here is to wet it with a hose as you lay it down, because inevitably you're doing this in the spring and the spring winds are just blowing everything all over the place. Wetting it helps it stay kind of in place until you can get some mulch sprinkled on there. So newspaper, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 layers thick. And then if you're using the brown paper or the cardboard, just 1 layer is probably pretty good for those. That's worked pretty well in my gardens. So Susie, you mentioned the type of mulch. Wood mulch seems to work the best. It can be arborist chips that you get for free. You basically are looking for a nice uniform weight that can be placed on top of that paper, because the main goal here is we're holding that paper in place and we're compressing it down on top of the grass. As the grass starts to die off and break down, we want the weight keeping everything in place. So yeah, Marlene, you mentioned leaf mulch or grass clippings. I think those would be good to integrate in for just for some nice extra nutrients as they break down. However, I don't think they would be heavy enough to keep the paper and the cardboard in place for this process. I mean, unless you had a lot of grass clippings and a very thick layer of leaf mulch. So, okay, yeah, I think we got our questions covered. And so, yeah, in this photo, so this is actually the side of my house here that I roasted earlier. The arborvitaes are gone. And you can see I'm using the black landscape edging along the front part here. And you can actually see at the other side, I'm progressing toward the other end. I've got the newspaper laid out, and I'm weighting it down as I go. Okay, so here, it does really help that you spread the mulch kind of as you go, especially in that newspaper. The newspaper is going to want to blow all over the place, even if there is no wind. So it's, if you have a helper, it goes really fast. Otherwise, you might need to really do like a set of paper and then a handful of mulch in the center, and then lay your paper down, handful of mulch, and then mulch that, few sets that you did. And you really will. Once you get the first few pieces down, you're going to really get a feel for it, and it's going to flow really smoothly. So then once you have got your area covered, you finish with just a full and thorough watering of the whole area. Get the mulch soaked down, just to really jumpstart that process of smashing that grass down, starting the first stages of breaking down the paper and just getting everything nice and smooth. Very important note here is to, in the very beginning, and at least for a few weeks, avoid walking on the places where you have put the paper. Newspaper, especially, that wet paper will tear the moment you step on it. So definitely work from one edge to another as you're doing this. Cardboard's a little sturdier, but it would tend to shift, and you would tend to separate, if you've got two pieces of cardboard together, you would tend to separate them as you do walk on it. So yeah, work from one edge to the other, just to get the most thorough smothering of the grass. So Karen, you asked about getting arborist chips for free. So there's a lovely website called Chip Drop. They're active in this area. I've heard a lot of people have pretty good experience with it. Usually, I mean, the next day is the fastest response I've heard of, to no more than a week, maybe 2 weeks, to people that are using the Chip Drop service. So that just connects you with local arborists who are cutting down trees and shrubs and mulching that. And they love it because they get a spot to get rid of their chips. And Andrea, I've not had to deal with squirrels digging. I would hope that in the beginning, they're not going to be as interested in the area, but I cannot speak to that for sure. So I can't help you a whole lot there, just because I've not experienced that too much myself. They love my bird feeders, but they have not torn up my garden when I've done this process. They have kind of ignored it. Okay, so I have two approaches here for how long you should wait before you plant. So the first step is the fast approach. It's one that I've used. I've also used the longer approach. So both are effective. It's just a slightly different take on each of them. So after about 2 weeks, the grass underneath will have flattened sufficiently to allow light foot traffic. I'm not talking like a lot, constant movement, but enough to step on, do your planting, and step off. It should manage that pretty well. And the way that you check that is go to the mulched area and step on it. If it feels springy, you probably need to wait a little bit longer. And if it feels pretty solid and doesn't really spring that much, you're probably pretty good to go. So with the fast approach, that paper and cardboard is not going to be broken down yet. So what you're going to end up doing is using your trowel and poking a hole in the paper and in the cardboard, and planting into that hole that you've created. You will need to pull the grass because there will be grass under there that's still slightly green. So you will need to pull the grass, that top layer by hand or with your trowel, remove that top layer of sod as you go. So the pros and cons of this, you get to plant really quickly. You can do this all in a season. The planting process itself does take a little bit longer than the second, only because you're removing the grass at each planting hole, and you will get some residual weed growth and grass regrowth at the planting holes from the torn paper, that you will need to kind of keep an eye on, just because you don't want that remaining grass to outcompete your small plant. And I do not recommend this process if you're using seeds, only because the grass is still there. And when you plant seeds, you want the seeds to be going into soil, not resting on top of paper or cardboard. And Elizabeth, you asked if this method works on plants other than grass. You have a garden area overrun by invasive weeds, don't we all? So yeah, this is pretty successful because you are cutting off those weeds from what they truly need, which is sunlight. So if you've got really, really persistent thick ones, maybe you go with more of the cardboard coverage, which is going to be tougher. The cardboard will be in place probably at least a year before it even starts to break down. So yeah, Elizabeth, maybe you try cardboard and a 3-inch layer of mulch just to really smother out those invasives. Okay, so the slower approach. I've also done this. I tend to prefer this. It's a little more foolproof. Typically, I build the bed in the fall and it just rests over the winter. And then come spring, it is ready to plant. So after 3+ months, the grass below is pretty much toast at that point. So you just kind of scoot your mulch aside and you plant right into the soil that's beneath it. So this photo here, you can actually see I've got the mulch scooted aside and there's a little bit of bluish color there. That is all that's left of the newspaper from the previous fall. So yeah, it's ready to go. So it's pros and cons. It's a much cleaner smothering of the underlying grass. Planting is a bit quicker because you're not removing the grass as you go. With this approach, you can use seeds because you have soil exposure right underneath that mulch. So maybe scratch up the soil underneath a bit, put your seeds in place, and then lightly cover it with the mulch that you moved out of the way. Because there is less grass and weed competition at this point if you're doing seeds. And the con is you have to wait. So that is very difficult. But yeah, I've done it both ways. Both ways are effective. Okay, I have a comparison. So I have also done a process by removing the sod. I hired this done because I don't have like heavy tools, and like I said earlier, my clay soil is just heavy as heck and a nightmare to deal with. So yeah, I hired just a local um garden business, just to kind of a one-man show. And he had an edger and he drew these beautiful you know, I gave him the shape, but he edged it beautifully. He removed the sod. So the pros and cons of this. So pro, it's instant plantable area. So I threw some mulch down on top of this right away. So don't leave the soil exposed. So setting the shape is a very clean process. This may actually be a better option for you if you have more of an incline that you're working with. On inclines, the mulch tends to want to drift and wash downhill off of cardboard and paper. The cons of this: disposal of the sod or moving it's heavy, hard to deal with. With this case in particular, by far, this is my weediest darn garden of all of them. This is the only one I removed sod. Everything else was the smothering method, and I am weeding this one twice as much from the start as all the others. So because of that, I do recommend that at this stage here where the sod has been removed, you actually lay newspaper down, and then drop mulch on top. So you still get that smothering effect of seeds. And it's, yeah, physically demanding, and it's a higher upfront cost if you do hire it done. Okay, we're short on time, guys. I'm so sorry. We're almost to the end of my slides. So that was the lawn removal process. Jenny, are we still okay for a few more slides? Or do you want me to kind of cut it off there?
No, go for it. If anybody needs to leave, we understand, but yes, by all means.
Awesome.
keep going.
Okay, I'll try to make it worth your while. All right. So that kind of covers the lawn removal process. So I wanted to get your gears turning on a little more of the design. Oh, and somebody had asked, what time of year do you do each method? So the slow approach works the best if you've got 3 months to spare. So wherever you place that, like if you want to plant in April or May, and you want to do the slow approach, get your garden laid out in the fall, because you probably don't want to be out messing with a garden hose and going around on your hands and knees in February. So the fast approach, you could do that all in spring. You can get out there in April or the 1st of May, get it all laid out, buy your plants, take care of them, water them, and then plant maybe at the end of May or no later than the first week of June. So that would be kind of a recommendation for timing on that. Okay, so a few quick notes on designing and placement. So here's some real life examples. This is all my house. This is where I take the most in progress photos. So the first was out by my shed. So here you can see I've got some black landscape fabric. I had left a really dumb shape in front of the shed. And so I was fixing that, making it nice and smooth and easy to mow around. And I was also addressing an area where we walk because this door actually opens, and we were kind of beating down the grass there a little bit. So mulched everything, fixed that shape, we're in business. It's also proof that I once owned a butterfly bush, because that's what that is. So yeah, we all learn, and we all learn as we go, and it brought butterflies, but I've seen a lot more butterflies since I planted milkweed and host plants for those butterflies. So on the other side, I talked a little bit about these monster arborvitaes before, but my eye was constantly drawn to those giant shaggy things, and it was drawn to that vent that sticks out of the side of my house. So I just wanted to get something else interesting to look at there. And this is a very visible part of my house, so I wanted to share native plant love with everybody that drives by in my neighborhood. And then the last photo, that I should have zoomed in a bit more, but this is a little corner patch that I put in because the grass was always dying there. I think it was because of the cement. It was just too hot and dry, and not getting enough water. So I've got some plants in there. It's a lot more interesting now to look at anyway. And it's also, since it's right in front of my front door, it was a spot where my eye was always drawn as I was pulling in. So why not have something interesting to look at there? Oops. Okay, so this is my pep talk for you guys. So back to my original point, getting started is the hardest part. Some plants will die, but some will live. You just keep on going. The path to my multiple gardens in my yard is paved with the dead bodies of plants. So it's going to be okay. So when you're first starting out, especially if this is your first garden, try to only stick to like 4 to 5 species, because in this first year or first 2 years, you're going to get to learn what they look like when they first emerge, what their leaves look like, how to distinguish them from weeds, which is honestly a really hard part when you're starting out with native plants. So the third point, which I should have made, point number 1 is from here on out, you've all been told, don't plant any invasive plants. So just when you're at the store, just Google it before you buy it. We all have supercomputers going around in our pockets now, so use it to your advantage. And that is the single best thing you can do, is to not plant anything invasive. So the next recommendation, a lot of my customers come to me because they have jumped in and they've bought these beautiful plants and they've loved all the butterflies and the finches that eat the seed heads. But what they've ended up with is what looks like a weedy meadow and not so much a garden that they want to share and brag to their neighbors. So the secret to this is only sticking to a few species to begin with, and the plants that you do choose, plant a grouping of them in one spot. So if the space in your new garden allows, put 3 or 4 or 5 of the same thing in a grouping, and then put 3 or 4 or 5 of the next plant next to it. So this helps it look intentional and helps you avoid the beautiful meadow look that is wonderful. But some neighbors can get kind of grumpy about it. So as you're going about this, keep your shorter plants at the front, your tallest plants at the very back, or depending on your field of view, put your tallest plants in the center and then go to the shortest plants out to the edges. And then aim for a spring bloomer, a summer bloomer, a fall bloomer, and a grass. And this will give you just a nice high impact combination. It'll give you something to look at through the whole year. And the nice thing about a lot of our native plants is they bloom for a couple months. So you will have hopefully a close overlap of some color in your garden at all times. So I wanted to point out, so Coralie had mentioned this, but the INPS website has a neat section with native plant palettes. So that's a great place to start if you're trying to identify like what types of plants need to go in the spot that I've got available. Okay, so everyone, I'm not going to read all of these. This was my information dump of the plants that I find myself using the most in my designs for people. So please take a moment to take a picture or a screenshot or whatever method you have available to you. I do have a couple non-native plants listed here that are great problem solvers. So they're marked non-native, which they are, but they're something that I consider very native friendly. They behave well and they pair well with with all of our native plants. The advantage to kind of the lower left, the grape hyacinth and the crocus, is going back to what Coralie mentioned about the phenology of plants. So the grape hyacinth and crocus are going to be in bloom probably pretty much before any of the ones I have listed here, or at least overlapping. So they're going to give a little bit of color. The bees visit my crocus at the end of February, so you're really extending your bloom time. And likewise, at the total other end of the season, I do want to call your attention to the autumn bloomer, aromatic aster. So I kid you not, the aromatic aster is in my garden. I still have flowers, a few remaining on them in the 1st of December. So, and in November, they're just vibrating with bees. So a lot of bang for your buck from the aromatic aster at the very end of the season. Okay, so hopefully I've talked long enough that you've got your screenshot taken of these guys. Okay, and I think second to last slide here. So this is my shameless plug for Favor Native. That's me. I've been doing this for 6 years now. So I have the social media pages. Favornative.com is my website. I maintain a list, not nearly as extensive as the INPS list, but I do have a list of native plant sellers on my website that I and my clients have used and had good experiences with. I also have a whole page on my website dedicated to this no-till method. So all you have to do is just go to my page or go to my website and just search and you'll find it from there. I do have a few pre-planned gardens that are available for purchase. So I have sun, shade, and if you want to even, while you're getting on this crazy native plant journey, you want to integrate vegetable and edible gardens, I've got an approach to that as well. And then I offer garden coaching. So that's a 1-hour session, one-on-one with me, and we just talk about specific things to you. So that's Favor Native and me in a nutshell. And environmentalists love to quote E.O. Wilson. So I laughed when I saw that Coralie had him listed in here. And I wanted this slide to not only flex on all the cool bugs that come to my yard now, but just to give us a kind of a call to action. And the whole reason why it's good that you guys are here, you spent your Wednesday evening doing this, and why, you know, the panelists on this webinar love doing what we do. So thank you for your time. It's been great sharing this with you guys.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was such fantastic information, a lot of information, and we really appreciate it. I think you even did a fantastic job of getting through so many of those questions. And if your question has not been answered yet, we are going to do a couple questions quickly. I know we're really running over time, so we don't want to take too much more time, but there are a couple questions that were sent in that I think might apply to a lot of people. And let me just say that if your question has not been answered and isn't answered by the time we hang up today, we will be going through and doing answering questions and sending links out to those saved on a blog post on HEC's website. So please know that we're not ignoring you, that we just have so many questions. We could only get to so many. So I am going to just ask, like I said, a couple of questions to Laura, Coralie, or anybody. Liz may even know some of the answers. She's welcome to pipe in, but a couple of them that we got. People have specific questions about, here, let me just read it. I think that'll be easier. What natives can I plant along the edge of a pond to prevent erosion? Any suggestions for that? There's been a lot of questions in here about slopes and kind of asking for recommendations for slopes or things that, you know, help with erosion and just keeping slopes, you know, stable. So are there any recommendations from either of you, specifics?
Yeah, so some of I'm really happy to if you want to send a few more details about your site by email. So depending on the kind of scale of the water body in the site, it can be really nice to prevent aversion to plant some of the woodier shrubby species that have kind of that will be longer lived and have deep roots. But obviously that's it's not always possible if it's not a large site, or if you need to have an open view. Yeah, if you're and again, depending as well as if it's sun or shade, or what the kind of conditions for the water body are. If you want to send any more details, I can try and answer that in a bit more depth.
And I think more of a more applicable to like a wider variety of situations. So the like pond side ecosystem is actually the plants that do well in rain gardens might do well along the water's edge. Like there's some overlap there, and Coralie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't designed a lot of pond edges actually. But yeah, you would be looking for plants that can handle some moisture. If you're looking on the INPS plant finder site, you know, you're looking for the like plants that like wet soil. So you could kind of start there. And then as Coralie mentioned, like the woodier, shrubbier plants, maybe you don't exactly go all the way up to the water's edge, but you start back just a little bit, because their roots are going to expand, not just down, they'll expand out a bit. So they will help stabilize the soil at the edge, but just bring them back just a little bit. So that would be my thought.
That's a really good point, Laura. And around the Icefield Museum downtown, we've been really successful with Queen of the Prairie and Joe Pyeweed and some of the irises and obedient plant. They've all absolutely thrived on the water's edge, and they look incredible. And they do really well there.
Excellent. I just lost my, any recommendations for places to buy low cost native plants? And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't know any. I will refer everybody, and I'll put the link back in our chat, but there is a resource list that HEC has compiled, and I bet you'd be able to find some good sources there, but would love to hear if you two have any suggestions.
So yeah, we have the Grow Indiana Natives directory. If you're buying in bulk, you can sometimes buy direct from the wholesalers, but you have to normally reach quite a large threshold. In some of the wholesalers, you have to be registered as a you have to have a wholesale account to be registered. It's really great to support some of the local sellers who run a business that way. The other really good thing, if you're looking for low cost seed, starting from seed can be a really good option. And that's we have a whole load of information on the INPS website about how you can start from seed.
I second that. I think, yes, I would say also, you know, speak to neighbors and friends. Plant swapping is a great way to get started in gardening at all. And certainly with native plants too, because chances are if somebody's planted something that's been in their area for a couple of years, they, you know, it's started to spread and reseed. And so they may be more than happy to share with you. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Laura, feel free. Well, let's just do one more question quickly, and then actually we do two, sorry. Maple trees. What grows under maple trees well? We all know that maple trees love to have those shallow roots that kind of take over. Any suggestions on what you might plant under those?
You go ahead, Laura, and I'll go after.
Yeah. I think the trick, honestly, I have all kinds of native plants growing within 10 feet of like a 15 or 20-year-old maple tree. I think honestly the trick is planting small plants, so planting the plugs that are this size, where you can dig through the roots, and you do kind of, some of the scraggly roots that come from the maple tree, you just dig amongst them and yank them out of the way, snip them out of the way. Um, that's how I've done it in my yard. The roots are kind of a constant thing, and I know I kind of shudder to think if I ever had to dig up the big ones that I've established there, but they are growing happily. Like all the roots just integrate together. Um, Prairie plants, native plants are used to fighting for their survival, they've got bulky, strong, deep roots that just grow through anything. So they can live amongst maple roots in my experience.
Yeah,
Can
I
I?
agree. It's great
Oh, this
advice.
is Liz Meserve. Can I really quickly add wild ginger? It's growing under my maple tree and doing really well. So, and then that's all.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Liz.
That's a really great suggestion. And yeah, a lot of the spring ephemerals that you find in the woods do really well. And another one that will grow very happily is the woodland phlox, the Phloxia varicata, that will grow very happily in the wild geranium, the Geranium maculatum. Those grow very happily. And then a lot of the asters will also, not necessarily the aromatic aster, the ones that need full sun, but a lot of the woodland asters will grow they're quite shallow rooted. They'll grow very, very quickly from seed. And if you put some seeds down, you'll find next to you have a lot of asters underneath your maple.
And I think
All right.
another approach could be is that if you're just having too much trouble getting through the roots, just dump soil on top. Give yourself 3 to 5 inches of soil and plant your new plant into that so that your plant can start getting established in the new soil before the maple roots work their way up to the surface too. So I know some people have taken that approach as well.
I've done that myself, and yeah, because the maple roots will come back, but you can do that, and you can absolutely, yeah, you allow the plant to be established. Absolutely, I think that's a great recommendation. So somebody was asking about an HOA friendly replacement suggestion for burning bush and Bradford pear trees, and that stood out to me. I know we have lots of recommendations, and I will let you take that over. Their question also asked, should they let them live out their lifespan and then replace, or cut them down and replace? And I'm going to say, for both of those, get rid of them as soon as you can. I understand there is a financial issue. It's not cheap to have trees cut down, but the burning bush, if you have to go out there with your own hacksaw and do it. It is spreading. Both of those and all of our invasives are spreading so quickly. It's really kind of terrifying. So I'm going to answer that part and say that do it now. Do it as soon as anybody can. And I'll if I see you guys agree with me, if anyone has any recommendations for replacements for those.
Yeah, so for Bradford pear, serviceberry is a really nice one. It blooms at the same time as a Bradford pear. It's got this beautiful white blooms, but it is much better for wildlife. It has, so I definitely agree with Jenny. Get rid of the Bradford pear and the burning bush as soon as possible. And then flowering dogwoods are also lovely. Redbud can be a really lovely one that can spread a bit more, but it is a beautiful tree, similar size to a Bradford pear when it's small. And for burning bush, we do actually have native euonymus, native burning bushes, east of the wahoos, which have that incredible color in the autumn. There again, some of the lovely shrubbier dogwoods. Pagoda dogwood is a beautiful one. Choke cherries, choke berries, a wonderful replacement. The Aronia melanocarpa, that can be a great shrub-like replacement. And again, a plug for the native plant website. We have some alternatives for some of these species listed on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out INPS. The website will have answers to just about every question I think that has been submitted. To be honest, it is just really a wealth of information, and clearly has been years in the making. So, well, I think we should wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everyone, again, for being here. I did include emails for both Coralie and Laura. I hope that was okay with you two in our chat. That if you do have follow-up questions, you know, reach out to them or they can direct you. And again, we will be answering more questions as soon as we can. And thank you so much for coming. Please do fill out the survey. And I have to say, we had well over 200 people that were attending this survey today. So that was fantastic. And it's just very exciting to see so much interest in native plants. It gives me hope, and I know it gives everybody hope to see so many people. And the answers are out there. We encourage all of you people that are new to this to keep with it, because it's fun and it's something you will no doubt be very passionate about soon. And we're so appreciative for your interest. And also our next webinar, I should say, we don't have the registration quite up yet, but do keep an eye on your email. May 29th at 7 o'clock, we'll be talking about how to influence your HOAs and your city and town ordinances, and get some changes made so that they are more native plant friendly, and less geared towards the lawn industry. So please keep an eye out for that. And we'd love to see you guys there. There were a lot of questions about that as well. So thank you so much, Laura and Coralie. And I also have to quickly say thank you to Liz Masur and Inder Frake, who have been in the background helping out with the webinar. I'm so appreciative. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.